It can be a strange world out there, and every delicious mystery might just have a nugget of truth. This is Cryptid Nuggets.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Cryptid Nuggets, a Beasty Boys Paranormal Adventures podcast. I am Jon Stenning, and joined, as always, at least for these two episodes, I am with Mitch DeAngelis. Hi, Mitch.
That's me.
That's right. We're recording our second episode. We've put one out into the world so far. If you haven't heard it, go back and listen to it. It's on our YouTube. It's on the channels you can find our podcast. Same places that Beasty Boys was, but now this. How do you feel about that, Mitch? We put our first episode out there.
Well, I think it's my favorite episode yet.
Wow. Okay. How many times have you listened back to it? A lot?
Well, I listened to it a couple of times while I was editing it. But,
yeah, of course.
It's also our only episode so far.
Yeah, right.
So, it's by default my favorite. Maybe this one will be even better. Who knows?
It's a low ceiling, high floor situation right there.
Exactly.
So yeah, we talked about Bigfoot. We talked about some chips last time. This time, you're going to tell me a tale in the first half of the show. And basically, if people haven't heard the show before, I'm a bit more of a skeptic. Mitch is a Looney Tune, and he.
Well, I'm not quite Daffy Duck here, but
No.
I'm more willing to believe certain outlandish things, I think, than John.
Yeah. Hey, can we talk about the Bigfoot news real quick?
Sure.
There's a lot of Bigfoot news in the news recently. Even by the time this episode's come out, it might be a couple weeks past now. But there's this new footage of a Bigfoot that was clearly just in a shampoo commercial, and Mitch thinks it's real. Mitch, why do you think it's real?
Well, actually, my opinion has flip-flopped a little bit since then.
Great.
Right?
Okay. Perfect.
So if you haven't seen the Silverton Bigfoot footage that was shot by the couple on the train. That was going
some tourist
down,
train, right?
Yeah, it was a tourist train down in Colorado, passing from Silverton to Durango. It was all over the news. It's got like
if you're into this
shit,
if you're into this shit, you probably saw it because it was even like just on regular person Instagram and everything.
At first when I saw it, I was rather impressed by some of the things that the subject in the video did, like and mostly like the coloration of it, right? Because
blended in with the background so well.
Yeah, like it felt like what a natural creature should look like if it was real, right? To blend into the background.
Right.
So
if you or I were to do this is what we would do.
Exactly, right? And when it crouches down or sits down or whatever, right? It vanishes.
It vanishes.
Right? But after doing some research on
what does that mean?
The local area. Well, first of all, I guess the Sasquatch has been a long-standing mascot of the Silverton area.
That's the problem. That's
for quite
the problem.
some time.
Yeah.
Right. To the point where supposedly, it was quite common for a couple of pranksters there to don a Bigfoot costume and go out and fake something, right? But what really was the nail in the coffin for me is there's a company out of Silverton that's called like Sasquatch Campers, right? And John, you sent me the photo of it, but I didn't quite understand what I was looking at because you sent me the photo with no context.
Yeah, that's me. That's classic me. Just send a photo with no context. Yeah.
But they made a post on social media, right, after this Silverton sighting where, first of all, they have a Bigfoot suit that they use to advertise their campers all the time.
And it has, like, long, blonde, shiny hair.
Yeah, and they made a post on social media that it said it wasn't us, and it had a picture of a electric razor and, like, a bunch of shaved, like, brownish blonde hair, and then the following photo after it was one of their guys wearing just like the Bigfoot hands and the Bigfoot feet working on some camper, with the joke, obviously being that it wasn't us because we shaved him, and put him back to work, right?
Right.
So you know, that to me screams, all right, these guys hoaxed. It was a good hoax.
Hey, they nailed it. They nailed it. We're still talking about it, right? People were talking about it. It was solid 72 hours of just like, holy shit, did you see this? It looks really good. But yeah, I mean, you know, once you look into it a little bit and like read more about the area.
You know, originally I said because it was just from the quality of it and stuff, I told you that was one of the better pieces of footage that I saw this year. But, you know, it's one of those cases where it's too good to be true, right?
Yeah.
And if anybody out there is curious, the best footage I've seen all year is
he's got a number one.
That shot. So it was shot in like I think Ontario, and it's
in Canada. That's Canada.
It's these two guys. They're kayaking or paddling some type of boat or something. Just don't.
Yeah, Mitch is a true outdoorsman. He really knows the difference.
Yeah, I am the most shut-in outdoorsman out there.
Yeah. You can't even tell the difference between a kayak and a canoe or whatever. But
they're
out on the water.
Whatever vehicle that was.
Yeah, they're out on the water. Yep.
Yes, so they're on the water. You know, they're filming the land that they're, you know, just exploring or whatever. And then right out into a clearing. Again, it's almost too good to be true. But this one said to me, this is definitely way more legit, is, you know, this big lumbering, what appears to be a Sasquatch, comes right out of the clearing. It's doing the classic Patterson-Gimlin walk with the way that it's, and also, like, the proportions of it are incredible. Like, the way that it kicks up its knees as it walks way beyond, like, how a human would normally bend their knees. And, you know, you can see the arms of it. They almost, like, scrape the ground while it's walking because its arms are so long. And it's only, like, a couple of seconds long that it's out there in the clearing because it passes, you know, from, like, one set of trees to another. But it's basically, it's either CG or it's real. There's no other way. You can, a human, that's not a human in a costume. It's impossible. Because it passes right in front of a bunch of spruce trees, and, you know, the average height of an adult spruce tree is like 50 to 70 feet, and this thing is, you know, almost
You're obviously ready to take this to court.
Tall.
You're ready to just take this to court. You know,
Yeah, exactly. I am ready to make a sworn affidavit that I believe that video is real.
Yeah, all right. We'll have to break it down. Like, maybe we can break it down in an episode in the future where we're, like, looking at footage at the same time. You know what I mean?
That could be a fun idea. Yeah. I would love to show you what I think some of the best examples of actual, you know, good Sasquatch footage is, right? But
no, go ahead.
Well,
were you gonna transition? Were we both thinking about transition?
I was going to try to transition the subject.
What was your transition going to be? Because I've got mine locked and loaded.
Oh, okay. Well, I want to hear yours first.
No, I just put you on the spot. You can't do that to me.
Ouch. Okay. Well, I was going to say, but our subject today isn't Sasquatch because that's last week's news.
Yeah. 100% was going to be my same angle. Like, we're not talking Bigfoot today.
Yeah.
Instead, Mitch has some wild tale from the Queensland.
Yeah, we're going on a little trip across the pond today.
Or the king. There's a king over there now.
Yeah. First time in a while, I think. Right?
First time in a while they've had a king. Yep, and he just walks around all the time and he does king shit. And frankly, I can't stand him. Tell me something about something I might be more interested in than the royal family.
All right. Well, at first I want to talk to you about just Europe in general, right?
Okay.
Is, you know, one of the more later areas of the earth that become inhabited, right, by people. You know, if you're going by the whole theory of, you know, we have originally came from Africa and then we spread to the Middle East, into Asia, and then finally into Europe, right? But yeah. And, you know, eventually they crossed over to North America through the land bridge and all that stuff, right? But Europe has quite the history, right? I mean, every place has quite the history, but because we live in, you know, Western society, we know a lot about the history of Europe just because of how everything is, right?
Yeah, we're white and we learn about white people's shit.
Yeah. Well, you know, that's always been one of my big complaints about the school system because,
it sucks.
You know, I've done a lot of, like, my own research into you know, like Asian history and even African history, and it's all
learn about
just as fascinating. It's just they don't teach it.
Like,
right?
hey, there's a Great Wall over there. Okay.
Yeah, and that's about it, right? That's all you ever learn.
Yeah, it's awful. It's awful. But we
Yeah.
are just going to talk about more. We're going to just talk about more white people place.
Yeah. So
We'll change that in the future.
But Europe, is full of famous countries and famous cities that have been around for a long time now, right?
Yeah.
France, Germany, and the subject of the day is going to be England, right?
Yes, cheerio.
And the capital of England, of course, being London. So, John, you're more of a worldly person than I am.
Never been to Europe. I've never been to England.
I was going to say, I was going to ask if you have ever been or if you knew anybody who had ever been.
Well, my folks were just in England. My parents were just there.
Oh, yeah?
They have a friend that's from there, but I don't I told my mom I was doing a podcast about paranormal shit, and she was just like, "Oh boy," so it's not like my mom went out looking for some like London lemming or something.
Yeah.
But no, I have not traveled over there. What it's a rainy country. I know that.
Yeah.
That,
Yeah, well, that's the stereotype is, it's wet, it's cold sometimes.
My
right?
ancestors come from that part of the world, but I don't care about that sort of stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
My dad's side of the family is very English, Scottish, Welsh, but
oh, okay, interesting.
so I guess it does appeal to me in that way. I like Edgar Wright movies. Does that count? I really like Edgar Wright movies. Yeah.
So, for me, I've always been fascinated with the medieval era and knights and castles and stuff like that. And there's a whole lot of history in England.
Yeah, you have a big Ren Fair.
All
you have
that
a big
sort of
Ren
stuff.
Fair energy.
Yeah, right. And my favorite movie of all time is Braveheart, right? Which is set on the British Isles about the war between Scotland and England, right?
Yep.
So, England is, to me, one of the most iconic countries in the world for a lot of reasons, especially here in America, because there's so much that our pop culture is English related,
Oh yeah.
we care. I feel like we care more about the royal family in this country than the people in England do.
No. I don't think so. I think they care more about I think our culture is the media centric entertainment capital of the world. As much as America sucks at doing a lot of things, they still do lead the world in entertainment. So I think that we're very closely intertwined in that way. Yeah, I mean, there's got to be some over there. Is that a word I shouldn't say? I probably shouldn't say that word.
I don't even know what it means.
Me either. I'm probably gonna bleep it out and just leave everyone
But it's
guessing.
provocative and it gets the people going.
Gets the people going. Yeah. So I see what you're saying, though. We are very closely intertwined, socially. Obviously, very Anglo-Saxon. Speaking English, speaking So there aren't that much differences. So there's a lot for us to sort of glam onto as Americans. Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm getting at, right? So, the city of London is incredibly famous, right? It's got all these incredible, landmarks from the Tower of London, Buckingham Palace,
that
London
new friggin'
Bridge,
Ferris
right?
wheel. Yep.
Abbey Road, if you're a fan of the Beatles, right?
Yeah, speaking of walking like this.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. What a lot of people probably don't know is that London is a very, very old city, right? In comparison to some cities that you think would be older than they actually are, for instance, the capital of Germany is Berlin, right? But Berlin wasn't. Well, I'm telling you. The capital of Germany is Berlin, but Berlin wasn't founded until the 1300s. But you would think it would, a famous city like that would be much older,
No, I wouldn't.
Really?
But no, because we live in America, and the oldest shit is so relatively young to the rest of the world. I guess I don't know. I think Rome is old, but I wouldn't think Berlin is old. How old is London?
So London, dates back all the way to 47 A.D.
What?
That's how old London is.
Wow,
right?
I did not expect you to say that. That's way older than I thought you were gonna say.
Yeah, London is it's not one like the oldest city in the world, because there's places that are older in, you know, like Asia and the Middle East, and Rome is older, right?
Yeah,
But like in terms of like big famous cities, London is one of the oldest, right?
Wow.
So London was founded in 47 AD by the Roman Empire, and
Classic.
they built it on the river Thames. How do they say that? I've always been confused about that.
Thames,
the river Thames, right? I'll never say it correct. So
it's spelled Thames, Thames.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure.
But it's not pronounced that way. It's like called like the river Thames or the river Thames or something. But,
I'm not gonna do an accent. If you do an accent and you say Thames, that's how it sounds.
Oh, okay, yeah. So it was built, you know, by the Romans on this river in 47 AD. And the reason they built it there was no settlement there at the time. So they basically built it from nothing because it was like at the perfect spot for the river to be narrow enough that they could build a bridge across it. But also, you know, the river was deep enough and it was close enough to the sea that they could bring ships in for, you know, delivering supplies and trade and stuff. So, when London was first formed, it's called Londinium in Latin, right? That was the Latin name of it.
Why was it named in Latin and not Roman?
Well, because that's what the language the Romans spoke.
Okay. This isn't a history podcast.
I know.
I don't know much about history. I'll be honest with you there.
That's okay. That's all right. So, you know, London, eventually the Romans leave England, right? They abandon it, and it gets taken over by the Angles and the Saxons, who become the Anglo-Saxons.
Yep.
And Londinium, which is not the capital at this point either. It's just another city, right? It becomes known as like Lunden, which is like the German pronunciation of London. And then finally, in the Middle Ages, the Normans from France invade England, and they take over the Anglo-Saxon country. And the Normans speak French, and they call the city London, right? Like the French pronunciation of London. So that's when London becomes the capital of the new Kingdom of England in the year 1066, and has been the capital of England ever since, right? So, you know, as time goes on during the Middle Ages, England becomes one of the most powerful nations in Europe, and London becomes one of the, you know, most wealthiest cities and populous cities in Europe. And then during the 15th to 17th century, it's sort of like on par or even much more populous and rich than places like Rome. It's on the same level as Paris, you know, all the big European cities that you would think of being big, right? And in the year 1666,
hell yeah.
I noticed the date. It's a very extreme date for what's about to happen. There's an event that's called the Great Fire of London.
Ah, yes. Did a cow start this?
Supposedly, there's many theories, right?
The cow
it could have been a
over
bakery. It could have been multiple things. It could have been arson. We don't really know for sure. But what we do know is that because most of the city at this time was still wooden buildings, about 60% of London was completely destroyed by this fire.
Wow.
Yeah. So naturally, when the entire city's destroyed, you have to rebuild it. So the way they rebuilt London today is basically how it's laid out in the modern world.
Oh, okay.
Because before then, it was incredibly different in
just
the
all
way a lot of
hodgepodge
streets and areas were
right.
laid out and stuff like that.
Let's take this opportunity to rebuild this city.
Yeah,
Replan
basically.
it. Let's replan it all. Yeah, okay.
So London, you know, in the 18th and 19th centuries is the capital of the British Empire, which is, you know, the biggest empire to ever span the globe. And there's a lot you can say about the British Empire, and negative and positive, right? They did a lot of things. But the key thing to take away is because it was like the thriving capital of this global empire, London actually is a very diverse city. because of that. A lot of people don't probably know that, but there's a lot of ethnic populations from all over the world, from Asia, from Africa, from the Americas, that all sort of congregated in London during the height of the British Empire, and they're there today. So modern London is a very metropolitan sort of place. Just like New York City, Paris, Tokyo, any place you think of like the big modern city. And a lot of it's divided into these districts and neighborhoods and boroughs, they call them, in central zones, some of which are pretty famous. Like you might know Westminster, which is where Buckingham Palace is, and the Tower of London. And another one you definitely have heard of is Wimbledon for the tennis tournament.
Tennis.
Exactly, right? Some more historically inclined people might be familiar with Whitechapel.
Okay, now you're saying I'm not historically inclined.
Well,
wow.
People would know. Listen, Whitechapel.
I've heard of Whitechapel. That's some metal band I listened to in high school.
Yeah, do you know why they're named after Whitechapel?
Probably because they're from there or some dumb shit like that.
No, actually, it's they might also be from there, but it's because Whitechapel is where Jack the Ripper was in London.
Yeah, I was going to say earlier, one thing I do know a lot about is Sweeney Todd, and that's English.
That is English.
And scary.
And it's about it is pretty spooky, and it is about sort of a serial killer.
Jack the Ripper's cool. I do like how cool Jack the Ripper is.
Yeah. So the subject of the stories I'm going to tell, I just wanted to kind of set some facts about London so we could sort of have it pictured in our head. The stories I'm going to tell today are going to be centered in this area called Mayfair in London. And Mayfair is this upper-class residential sort of commerce center. It's got these big, expensive, elaborate townhouses is what they're called. They're like these big manor houses. And today it's actually considered one of the most expensive districts in the world.
Oh, great.
Yeah. So this is like, a real bougie place.
I hope some sort of monster is killing all of them as we speak.
Oh, well, wait till you hear what we have in store.
Okay.
So among the many parts of Mayfair, there's this garden square, and it's known as Berkeley Square. And the trees in Berkeley Square, this is a little fun fact, are actually the oldest in London. They were planted in like the 1700s, and they're still around today. So it's like a tourist attraction too.
Okay, yeah,
right?
That's cool. Yeah.
So a garden square sits in the middle. There's streets around it, and lining the streets are those big, wealthy, multiple-story townhouses, which I told you about. And they would be like luxury homes for aristocrats and rich people, where they would hang out in their off time. Some of them would live there permanently. Some of them owned it as just another piece of property because they could have tons of them. However, during the 1800s, there was one notorious townhouse, and it sat at number 50 at Berkeley Square, and it had a very sinister reputation, as it was known as the most haunted house in all of London.
Oh, okay.
So let's talk a little bit about
what year was this? What year was it coined? This?
So it was coined the most haunted house in London in 1879. Right? And the stories I'm going to tell take place pretty much all in the 1800s. But let's talk just a little bit about. I'm curious what your thoughts are on ghosts and hauntings and that sort of stuff.
Yeah. So I really like ghost movies, but I don't know if I necessarily like. I don't know. I feel so okay. To me, I need to see something, right, in order to believe it. All right, that's why Bigfoot footage is more interesting than just a Bigfoot story, right?
Yeah.
And it's the same way that I feel about ghosts. Now, people tell me, right, we live in New England, things are haunted around here. Actually, if some people are watching this YouTube video, some may say that the house that Mitch is sitting in is haunted, but that's another episode.
Yeah, that is. I have some stories to tell about that.
Now, I do think that I have had ghostly encounters, and both of these encounters happened on Block Island, which is a creepy place. It's an island. It's like 11 or 13 miles off the coast of Rhode Island, and there's all these old houses there, and I worked there for 8 days working on a movie, and there was a phone that rang that I unplugged from the wall, and there was a figure that we heard, and so I was like the audio guy in this movie. I unplugged the phone, and it still rang, and so I was like, this place is haunted. Now,
That's spooky.
Am I as quick to believe that your house is haunted? No, not necessarily. And that's no offense to you, but that's just because because one phone rang somewhere, I'm not like all ghosts are real. But that just speaks to my sort of relative skepticism about all of this stuff. Now, I also feel like ghosts are like the most tangible of a lot of this sort of paranormal stuff because I don't know. There's something about it that makes sense. Maybe it's because of my New England sensibilities. Maybe it's because I do like watching sort of scary horror movies that are like ghost centric. But I don't know. It's just as hard for me to believe as anything else. Like I think like aliens are at my list of like most likely to believe. Ghosts are sort of in the middle, and like weird monster things are sort of on the far side of. You know what I mean? And if I were to put it on a spectrum.
Yeah. I think that would probably be most people these days.
Like I'm not a religious person either, so like a spirit, like I don't think I have a spirit, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that speaks to it too a lot of the times.
Well, that's definitely going to bend you one way or another. You know, people who are more spiritual are definitely going to have, I think, a stronger opinion
100%.
on ghosts than, say, you know, someone who's more atheistic or agnostic or something like that. You know, and like you said, I think a lot of people would put stuff like aliens at the top of their most likely with paranormal sort of stuff. And then, you know, obviously crazy monsters are definitely at the bottom. But I think a lot of people, more than you would probably think, are at least open-minded to ghosts.
Oh, sure.
Right?
Oh, of course.
And haunted stuff, right? Because it's probably like one of the longest lasting traditions of humankind is that every culture has stories about ghosts. You know, every place has, you know, at least something about a haunted house or you know, some tragic event where the ghosts or the apparitions of the people long past are still seen. It's quite fascinating from just like an anthropological sort of lens. So I am, you know, more of a believer in ghosts than I sometimes would like to be.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's not very, it doesn't make you feel good to believe in ghosts. You know?
Yeah. So, you know, I told a story on the Beasty Boys podcast when we did an episode about ghosts where I saw something that could be explained, but it rubbed me really the wrong way. Yeah. And it felt not natural. You know, I've had some experiences in my own home since I moved homes, but I want to tell those on more of like a dedicated episode. I think.
Tell me about this London bullshit. Tell me about this house.
All right, you want to know about this house?
I want to know about the fucking house. That's what we're here for.
All right.
Help me believe in.
I wanted to start a conversation.
Help me believe in ghosts a little bit more.
Well, I don't know if this story's going to do that. But
okay. All right, that's fine.
All right, so 50 Berkeley Square, considered the most haunted house in all of London. It's built in 1740, and the first tale of it being haunted comes from like the 1780s. You know, during the time these stories would get printed in like newspaper, magazines, all sorts of stuff, which not always were the most reliable sources because a lot of times they would just make shit up.
Are they like regular newspapers, like the fucking London Times or whatever, or is this like some like explorer type of tabloid type of thing?
It's basically the 18th century 19th century equivalent of tabloids. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Right? Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
You know, stuff for
it's entertainment
to gossip. Yeah. It's the gossip magazines of the age, right? So, so the story goes that there's a young woman who lives at this house. Her name's Adeline, and she lives with an abusive uncle. And then one day, either as you know, a suicide attempt or a daring escape that goes wrong, or you know, the result of tragic abuse that goes too far, the people of Berkeley Square watched as Adeline plummeted out the top floor window to her death.
Yeah. How old is she?
She is a young woman, so somewhere in the 16, 17, maybe into the early 20s, right? Because back then, people tended to marry young and have families young and stuff like that. So it didn't take long after Adeline's death for people to claim they were still seeing her around the house, right? They would see either her shape walking past or through the window. Sometimes they would see it actually fall from the window, or they would, or hanging from the ledge before falling. And this was all stuff they were seeing after she passed away. So the house in the 1800s would trade hands a couple of times. A prime minister, actually, of Parliament lived there at one point in the 1820s, and he actually died in 1827 on the premises. And supposedly, as the story goes, he experienced a couple of signs of something not being quite right. He would hear lots of weird noises, and he would tell people that he had horrible nightmares all the time at this place.
Oh.
So after he passes...
sounds like a friggin' dumb paranoid politician.
Well, see, that's the thing, is, we're going to find out later that maybe there's more and less to this house than is to be believed. So Canning passes away. The house gets leased to a lady named Miss Curzon, and she doesn't live there, but she owns it. So she's not a permanent resident. There's a landlord that lives there and oversees it instead. And this is when a lot of the stories about ghosts and stuff start to really become more popular. And there's even stories of a monster.
Oh, a monster in the house? Like a tangible monster?
So our
like
first
a physical,
story,
corporeal being that is a monster?
Yes.
Okay.
So our first story takes place in 1840. There's this upstanding young chap. His name is Robert Warboys. He's like a college-aged individual studying at the local university. And he decides enough's enough with all these dumb ghost stories about seeing the ghost of Adeline and all that. Yep. And he says, I'm going to prove all these stories wrong.
Oh, okay.
So he goes to 50 Berkeley Square. And, he had been maybe drinking a little that night. He was partying the night away.
He was at the pub.
Some stories say he did this on a deer, right? Like the fellow lads were egging him on, right?
Yes.
So he goes to 50 Berkeley Square and he knocks on the door, and the landlord answers, and he basically accosts the landlord to let him stay the night because he wants to disprove all the stories. So Robert is not taking no for an answer. And he pushes the landlord, and finally the landlord's like, all right, I'm going to let you stay, but there's two conditions. The first is that he gave Robert a loaded pistol that he had to keep on him at all times while on the second floor. And the second is there's a bell in the second floor bedroom. If Robert saw anything out of the ordinary, he was to immediately ring that bell to summon the landlord for help.
The landlord lives there too, or?
The landlord lives there too, but he lives on the first floor.
And the first floor isn't haunted?
So all the activity about this place takes place on the second and third floor.
I forgot. Ghosts hate stairs. I forgot.
Yes.
Sorry, continue.
Yes, right? Well, it's interesting because there's tons of horror stories, ghost stories where only this room is haunted in this hotel. And it's why isn't the whole hotel haunted? It's only that one room. It's like
it's because that room is the draftiest room in the hotel. It's like wherever they forgot to do whatever construction people do to make something more or less drafty.
Yeah.
But
the walls aren't insulated enough.
Yeah, exactly. They ran out of that insulation, and they were just like, it'll be fine.
So, young Robert is unfazed by these bizarre
warnings.
conditions.
Yep, and he spends the night.
Oh, absolutely, he does. He makes himself right at home in that second floor bedroom.
Does he last the whole night?
No, an hour later.
An hour?
An hour later, the landlord is roused by the frantic ringing of Robert's bell, followed by a gunshot.
Oh, hell yeah. Okay.
So the landlord rushes upstairs, and he finds Robert. And now the most common form of the story goes that he finds Robert's corpse. He's cowering in the corner, like dead
He's
from
alive.
terror. Died of fright.
Oh, he died of fright. Oh.
He's still clutching the pistol in his hand. His skin's white as a ghost. His eyes are fixed open with a look of sheer terror, and they're fixated on the opposite corner of the room where there's a single pistol shot embedded in the wall.
Okay. That's most of the accounts? Other accounts say that he lives?
So there's a couple of different versions of this story.
Did this even happen?
This is one of those things where these stories were told about this place for ages.
183 years ago.
But no one actually really knows anymore if there's any hint of truth to any of them, right?
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Still
However,
fun.
there's articles from the time from all these tabloids about this. So is it true? I don't know. But yeah, in some versions Robert is he's still alive, but he's basically in a catatonic state, right? In other versions, he is in a much more visceral state. So, torn apart and stuff like that. But basically, this is like the first ghost story that sort of kicks off this place's reputation. So this spreads like wildfire in all of the tabloids and all the local magazines and stuff. And the next story takes place in 1843. So after Warboys dies in this house, or his encounter.
Yeah, he's dead. Right, he's dead.
So the townhouse gets locked up for 3 years. So it's sort of like condemned, right?
Right. Yeah. Nail a couple of boards to the front door and call it 3 years.
Exactly. So it's 1843, and there's these two sailors. Their names are Edward Blunden and Robert Martin. I'm going to call them Blunden and Martin just to avoid confusion with Robert Warboys. So
okay, great.
They're out partying. It's Christmas Eve. They're out partying. They're drinking. They're spending all their money. They're spending all their money on booze.
Everyone's fucking getting hammered in these stories.
Well, a good drink makes a good ghost story,
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So, they don't have any money to afford a place to stay because they spent it all on alcohol. So, they're looking around for some place. They find themselves in Mayfair. They're on Berkeley Square, and they find abandoned 50 Berkeley Square.
Oh, wow. Okay. So all right. So they go and they spend the night?
Yeah. So
they don't
break
know.
in through the basement window.
Yeah. Right.
So the building at this time had a rat infestation because it had been abandoned. So, and, they want to avoid the rat infestation, which was mostly in the basement and the first floor. So
Classic.
they make their way to the second floor.
Right, of course. Why wouldn't you? Ghosts don't go downstairs, rats don't go upstairs.
Yeah, everybody knows this. This is fact.
These are facts of the world, and if you're just learning them here, then thank you for listening to our podcast.
Yeah.
Well, yes, Mitch. So
just
continue.
Just like last episode where we learned that porcupines like salt, according to Albert Osman, which is, a fact of the world.
Porcupines like salt, much like me.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Yeah, so they climb up to the second floor.
So they go up to the second floor, and they end up staying in, of course, the same room that Robert Warboys died in.
Weird that there's a bell. Weird that there's a bell on the side of this bedroom here, right, Robert? Oh, yeah, sure. Stanley, or whatever the fuck the other guy.
Yeah, Martin.
Thank you. Yeah, Martin and
Blunden,
Burroughs.
Blunden and Martin, yeah. So it's, they thought it was a little weird, the building. It's kind of in disrepair, and, they heard some strange noises, and Blunden this whole time claims that, was telling Martin, like, I don't know about this, man. This place feels weird. Like, it just has that bad feeling to it, right? So, despite that, they go to sleep, and all of a sudden it's the middle of the night when Martin gets woken up by Blunden, and Blunden's in a panic, and he's like, there's something going on. Something's making noises. I can hear the sounds. I can feel the floorboards vibrating from movement. And now they have a rifle with them because, back in the 1800s, everybody just walked around with firearms. It was just the norm, right? So in the darkness of the townhouse, they hear...
Is that the start of your
sounds.
new poetry book? In the darkness of the townhouse. Mitch is writing poetry.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yes, continue.
So they hear the sounds of these, basically it sounds like something large and heavy is dragging itself across the floor.
Is this this is a monster then? Is this
so
the
Blunden
monster?
reaches for his rifle when out of the darkness, this dark gray, writhing, shapeless mass with a gaping maw leaps from the shadows onto him.
How can anything be shapeless?
I don't know. That's the words that they use to describe it at the time.
Either it's invisible or it has a shape. It can't be shapeless. It could be shaped like a pile of shit.
Well, I think what they probably meant was like it's amorphous. Its form is like
the blob.
squiggly.
It's
exactly.
blob.
It's basically a blob.
Okay. So the blob is here.
Yeah. So it leaps onto Blunden, and that's pretty much it for Martin. He panics and he runs straight for the front door, and he's screaming so loud. There's a nearby police officer making the rounds, and he attracts the attention real quick. So the officer,
constable, if you will.
Yeah. So he goes over and he smells the liquor on Martin's breath, because Martin's of course been heavily drinking.
Right.
But there's something about that look of sheer terror on Martin's face that makes him be like, all right, maybe I should check this out. So they go back to the house, and they look all over the house for any trace of Blunden. Right? And as the story goes, Blunden was indeed found, or rather, what was left of him was found. So his broken body was discovered in the basement, his eyes wide with sheer terror, right? All his bones were broken. It's possible that he either fell to his death, tripping down the stairs as he ran, trying to get out of the house, or he was killed by this strange entity which attacked him and dragged him to his death to the depths of the house. So from this point on, this bizarre entity becomes known as the Nameless Thing of Berkeley Square.
The Nameless Thing of Berkeley Square?
Yes, that's what they called it in all these newspapers and tabloids.
And so this happens in 1943. How long does this legend of this
I'm sorry.
blob...
This happens in 1843.
1843. Yeah, sorry, my bad.
Yeah.
1843. And this house is coined the most haunted house in London in 1899.
Yeah.
Does this monster stay around for 50 plus years inside this house? Like, what happens with the house after?
Oh, there's a lot more stories about this house. So, the house is still around, actually.
Still to this day?
To this day, you can go to it.
It's an Airbnb now?
Actually, it was up until recently, it was a business for antique books. It gets bought in the 1930s by an antique book business, which
classic.
Honestly sounds like totally appropriate for such a creepy place.
Yeah, right, because books can be haunted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Miss Curzon, who owns the house, she passes away in 1859. And the house gets purchased again by this guy named Thomas Myers. And Thomas Myers is buying this house because it's supposed to be the house he's going to move into with his fiancée, who he's going to be getting married to. Unfortunately, days before the wedding, she calls it off and leaves him for another man.
Wow.
So Myers lives inside the house from 1859 to 1874. And he's a recluse. So
who wouldn't be?
Yeah, he doesn't associate with anybody on the outside. He lives a completely nocturnal lifestyle. So he's up at weird hours, walking by the windows, guided by candlelight.
This guy's gothic as hell.
Exactly, dude. Right? This is
Damn.
basically like the main character of a Tim Burton film. You know?
Yeah, sounds it. Yep.
Right?
Fun.
So anytime anybody tried to come to the house, Myers' servants would like shoo them away. You know,
Okay.
no one was allowed inside. In fact, for a time, the government didn't even know who owned the house because that's how
That's on them.
reclusive this guy was.
Wow.
So they sent tax agents over there to go assess it to figure out who owned it. So, during this time, only one person was allowed inside, and in addition to Myers, and there's also all sorts of rumors that are being spread about other ghosts that are in this house, right? So there's stories about Adeline's ghost, and there's the story of, this young girl who wears a kilt, right? That's sometimes seen outside the house. And of course, people are claiming like they saw the nameless thing, this amorphous blob pass by the window and stuff. So, Myers entertains very few guests, and eventually he passes on, and the house is again abandoned. However, before he passes on, or literally right after, it's a little unclear. George Littleton, who is a baron, he's a politician, he's a conservative politician in London.
Great. Yeah.
He decides that he's going to take up the old mantle of Robert Warboys and prove that this house ain't haunted.
Oh, okay.
All right. So Littleton, he takes some supplies with him for the night, and of course, like any good conservative, he's packing his trusty firearm. He's got his trusty shotgun with him. You know?
Yep.
So yeah. So much like Warboys, Littleton decides to settle in for the night. He's got his shotgun at hand, and it doesn't take long for something to go wrong. So Littleton claimed that he watched as out from the dark shadows of the bedroom, this horrid entity emerged. He described what he witnessed as a brown, misty apparition, a swirling mass of tendrils, and the form of something reminiscent of a squid or octopus.
This is some Lovecraft shit.
Really, right? It's like fucking bizarre.
Yeah.
Right? So
what kind of drugs are they doing?
Littleton takes one look at this fucking eldritch horror and he unloads his shotgun at it.
Yeah.
So, the smoke clears. He looks around. The only thing he sees is his empty shells from his shotgun and nothing else. Needless to say, he did not stay there any longer. He got right the fuck out.
Of course. Yeah. Why would it? Yeah. Why would you? But so he now believes in ghosts. Is that the end of his story?
So his story goes on a little longer. So he goes on to say that the house at 50 Berkeley Square is fatal to both mind and body.
Oh, okay.
Now, in 1876, at the age of 59, so this is about 2 years later, Littleton takes his own life by throwing himself down a flight of stairs at his London home. Oh. This is a true thing. This is a true thing that happened. He was a real guy.
Yep.
Now, some people speculate he may have never really recovered from the supernatural trauma he experienced that night.
Sure.
So, there's one last sort of big story about this house. So, after this whole Littleton thing, after Thomas Myers dies, the house gets bought again in 1879. And it's purchased by a wealthy man. His name is sort of lost to time. And he's got these 2 teenage daughters. So, they're probably about like between the ages of 14 to 20 is what was considered teenaged at that time. So they are living there alongside their staff of servants, which includes a maid. We don't know the maid's name, unfortunately. Now, it's said that the daughters really didn't like this house because it smelled strange, right? So they said that it smelled like rotting wood, which makes sense because it's a wooden, all this old wood is probably rotting,
Yeah, the rats lived in it for fucking 3 years at least. Yeah.
And also it's got this musky sort of animal smell, like something you would smell at a zoo.
Right.
So
or the new Cthulhu cologne that you can pick up at Jason.
basically.
Yeah. Right. It smells like
Love
Cthulhu.
by Lovecraft.
Yeah. It's got an umlaut in the name, and
yeah.
Really.
So the eldest daughter, she has a fiance. His name's Captain Kentfield, and he's coming to spend some time in Mayfair, because it was customary then that, like, you know, the betrothed would come and live with the family to court the daughter and stuff like that, right? That's just how things were done. So the maid that I mentioned, it becomes her job to prepare the upper floor bedroom for this guest. Now, you know, she thinks nothing of it. She goes about her task at hand. 20 minutes later, her shrill screams are echoing throughout the entire house. You know, basically everybody in the house hears it. So they all rush to the bedroom that she was last seen going into, which is probably the same bedroom that those sailors stayed in, the same ones George
it's got
Littleton
the dang
was
bell.
in.
The bell's still hanging up on the wall.
Yep. So they find her. She's collapsed in the center of the room. She's still alive, but she's driven completely mad with fright. She's almost catatonic, and she's only able to repeatedly beg, "Don't let it touch me," over and over. So they take her to the hospital, and she dies the next day from the trauma.
Wow.
It gets even better. So now, remember, Captain Kentfield is still coming to the house to live there.
Right.
So he gets there, and, you know, his hubris is on par with just about everybody else who thought they were going to spend the night at this place. You know, no ghost ain't going to get me, you know?
Right.
So, you know, plus he's a captain. He's in the army. You know, he's probably seen some shit. Who knows? So he's going to stay in that room anyway. Right? He's not afraid. And what do you know? Much like the maid, sooner or later he's screaming in terror too. Everybody comes rushing to the room to find him, and there he is, dead, on the same spot that the maid was in.
Wow.
His face is completely contorted in terror at whatever he experienced.
Wow.
So these stories continue to be spread all the way up into the 1900s.
Yep.
Until the 1930s, where 50 Berkeley Square gets purchased by the Maggs brothers. And they're that antique book dealers that I told you about. So during the 1930s, Mayfair is turning from a residential place into like a commercial place. You know what I mean? Like, all these townhouses are being bought by businesses and being turned into stores and, you know, luxury destinations for tourists and stuff like that. So they operate an antique bookselling business, and they turned the ground floor of the building into their, you know, bookseller business. And they're in business there all the way until 2015.
Wow.
Yeah.
Never haunted?
No, since the property was acquired by the Maggs brothers, there wasn't a single report of any paranormal activity since.
Wow.
Although, as the story goes, the second floor and beyond was sealed off, and staff were informed never to set foot there and for it to never be used, even just for storage.
Wow. Okay. So, I mean, that's interesting. And what's up with, 2015 they closed or whatever?
So 2015 they closed because they moved to a different location.
Okay. What's there now?
So there now is, I wasn't able to find out what.
Damn.
I don't know. Right. So it could be, I assume it's probably just another business, right? Because that's what is on Mayfair. There's only one house that's still a residential house in Mayfair. So when we did the Beasty Boys, we did a whole episode about urban legends. Yeah. Right? 50 Berkeley Square might maybe just be an urban legend.
Yeah, right.
Right? Is the vibe that I get. But there was a lot of books since 1930s that was written about it that recorded all of these old stories from all the old magazines and newspapers about the nameless thing of Berkeley Square and the ghost of Adeline and you know the story of Robert Warboys, and that's where the you know the legend of this house really grew, right?
Sure.
When in reality, some people speculate that this place was never haunted at all, and that it was something that was, you know, the stories were conjured up by newspapers trying to sell copies, you know, by making up fantastic stories. And also, Thomas Myers was a real guy who actually did live there, and he was, just like I told you, he was super reclusive. And his mystery probably didn't help the reputation that the house had at all. Right.
Creepy guy living in the house, you might as well be Dracula.
Basically.
Yeah.
So, because, you know, it probably wasn't ghosts that people were seeing walking by the windows. It was probably him.
Him and rats.
Yeah, exactly. So, like I said, the government didn't even know who owned it because he was so reclusive. They had to send tax collectors there to, like, knock on the door and be forced to be let in.
Yeah.
So, and then it makes you wonder how much he probably owed on back taxes.
Is it still the most haunted? Is there a new most haunted house in London? Is it still known as that?
That I don't know, but that was its famous moniker for almost for over 100 years. Was the most haunted house in all of London, is how the story would always get told. And now I've mentioned that there's variations to a lot of these stories because it's been around for so long, right? So you know, like the story with the sailors, it appears listed as being 1843 at its earliest instance, but then the same story is like repeated again in the future to take place in 1888. Yeah. And then there's even some versions of the story that say it's 1943. Which makes no sense because at that point that's when the bookshop was there. Right. It wasn't abandoned, it was a bookshop. So
who knows?
Yeah.
Urban legend, though. I mean, interesting place to go and see and visit if you're there. You know, I wonder what's there now.
Yeah, I see. You know, and there's also the fact that, I mean, come on, we said it before, like the idea of this like octopus-like entity is something right out of H.P. Lovecraft.
Yeah, right.
Although the interesting thing is like the story of it like predates Lovecraft. Right. So it's interesting in that respect, but like also, I mean, come on, the idea of sailors being slaughtered by an octopus monster on dry land. Yeah. You know, it's like, it's almost like a parody of a monster story.
Yeah, it's like the 5th Pirates of the Caribbean movie or some shit. You know what I mean?
Exactly. It's like, it sounds so made up. Yeah. You know? So.
But interesting.
Yes, but don't let that distract you from the fact that there is a lot more to London that supposedly is very haunted.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So, you know, there's all sorts of probably much more compelling stories about, you know, like the Tower of London and especially like the dungeons and stuff that are left over from that period. And, you know, I'm sure there's all sorts of creepy houses that are probably very old because, as we established, London is very old.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So, you know, was there a monster at 50 Berkeley Square?
No.
Probably not. Right?
Yeah. I don't think so.
And I've heard some people try to make up reasons why there could have been, like, well, what if it was actually an octopus that was living in the plumbing, or like...
Yeah.
That's totally
reasonable.
Plausible.
Yeah, maybe not an octopus, but a squid.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So, I originally wanted to do a much more serious ghost thing, but when I discovered this not too long ago, and also knowing the name of the snack we were going to try later, I was like, oh, it has to be this.
Yeah, the Monster 1-to-1 is great. We're going to be talking about a snack in just a second that is like monster-centric. It's actually very, very monster-centric. Monster is a big part of the lore of this snack. So, yeah, I mean, I do think it was interesting. Like, I love that it turned from a ghost story to some sort of, I mean, I guess shapeless does make sense knowing that it's like this weird foggy blob that like also can come alive. But yeah, I mean, interesting. Nonetheless. And I don't believe in ghosts any more than I did beforehand, but I don't know that. I don't know if you thought this was your most convincing angle.
Yeah. Do you believe in octopus monsters though?
Yes, I do believe in octopus monsters. Yeah.
Right. So there's one right behind you right now.
Ah! Oh wow, that's a good transition. We are going to take a break. We're going to be back with a snack, a monster snack in just a second. We are back. Cryptid Nuggets. Mitch told me a story about a monster that doesn't exist in the first half. And now we are going to taste a snack that very much does exist. But before knowing about the snack for this episode, I did not know it existed. I'm going to pull up my bags here. Mitch, tell me if you've ever heard about Monster Munch before.
So I haven't actually opened mine that got sent in the mail, right? But I had never heard of this either. And the way that it was sort of discovered was we were trying to come up with a name for our show, and we were trying to come up with, some variation of like spooky thing plus an onomatopoeia for eating or something that had to do with eating or a snack of some type. And, Monster Munch got suggested, and we wanted to make sure it wasn't taken, so we Googled it, and these were discovered. Right. So I haven't actually opened mine yet, so I'm gonna do that right now.
Yeah, they're made. So let me tell you a little bit about them as you dive into that bag. So you just dove into a big bag with a bunch of single servings. That's what I was holding up before. There are 3 different flavors, but let's talk about the history of these bad boys real quick. So they are a British-based corn snack. So they are from the same town as the same country as the most haunted house that we talked about earlier. They are from 1977, so not the oldest thing in that old country. They were made by Smiths originally, which was a chip manufacturer, and now they're made by Walkers. If you're watching the YouTube video, you will see that Walkers looks like the Lay's logo, but it just says Walkers instead, which is very interesting.
I wonder, is there any connection to that? Or
there is a connection to it. It's very complicated.
Oh, okay. I'll
it's
take
too
your word for it then.
It's just too. It's like the same, but it's different because of different countries and all that sort of shit.
Well, what's that quote from Tommy Boy? You can take a good look at a T-bone by sticking your head up a bull's ass, but I'll just take the butcher's word for it.
Yeah, just take the butcher's word for it.
Yeah.
Exactly. Currently, they have 3 flavors, which are what we have in front of us: roast beef, pickled onion, and flamin' hot. And they are a shaped snack, and according to Walkers, they are shaped like monsters' feet. So those are monsters' feet. So I say let's dig in, and I will tell you a little bit more about the history of them and why monsters are so important to this brand. Which one do you want to try first?
Oh, I don't know. I'm like almost dying to know what the hell pickled onion even is. So like,
all right.
I sort of want to try that one first.
Okay.
But I'm also afraid of it because I'm afraid the palate of it might ruin the rest.
Yeah, you got a palate cleanser there? You got a Mountain Dew or something?
I get some Gatorade on standby, but we'll see.
All right, so are you going pickled onion?
I'm going to go pickled onion.
All right, same. Yeah, so we have not tried these, right? So Smiths did make these from 1977 up until 1995. Originally, there were 4 different monsters. Now we have just the 3. Roast beef was the first flavor.
Oh, okay.
And pickled onion was the second flavor. So let's try this second flavor. They are shaped like monsters, monster paws.
They are.
Which is nice.
It's a cute little design.
It is a very strong smell.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, that was the first thing that hit me when I opened the bag. I was like, holy shit.
Now, speaking of strong, how about you try this while I talk about some of the other flavors they used to offer? They had saucy, they had sizzling bacon, and then they had cheese and onion, giant prawn, and salt and vinegar. So at one point, they offered like these 6 different flavors. What are your thoughts? What are your first thoughts upon trying the pickled onion?
So before I even talk about that, I just want to make sure I heard you correctly. Did you say giant prawn?
Yep.
Like a giant shrimp.
Yeah, like a jumbo shrimp, but a giant prawn.
Oh. Man, why'd they discontinue that? I would have loved to try that.
You can still get prawn flavored chips and stuff. That's like, maybe we'll try them on the show sometime. Pickled onion, I'm getting a lot of vinegar.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I would almost compare its taste to something like a Funyun. Right?
It is like a Funyun.
But the vinegar aftertaste was not expected. But I guess it makes a lot of sense because it's pickled. And what do you pickle things in? Vinegar. Usually.
Yeah, it's definitely like a Funyun. It's a little bit heartier than a Funyun. I don't think what I have is stale. It doesn't taste stale. It says it's good up until January 20th of 2024. You know, they do their dates all out of order over there.
Oh, yes.
We did import...
I didn't even look for mine. Yeah, mine's 20/01/24, so January 20th, right?
Yeah, same batch, baby. We got the same batch. But yeah, they're pretty good. It's a small bag. It's like, very like standard serving size. They show a lot more of the nutrition value, they being the British, on their bags. It's really fun. It says miniature monsters with big crispy heads are crunchy claws plucked straight from pickled onion beasts. And there's a lot of weird puns that I'm not going to continue to read. So they used to have multiple shapes that coincided with the monsters that were pictured on the bags. And in 1994 was when Flamin' Hot hit the scene. And that was in the Mega Monster Munch varietal. So that was up until 1994 when Smiths still made them. And then Walker's, who makes them now, they took over the brand in 1995 and then made them pretty much all the way up until 2008.
Okay.
And there were, at that time, there were 4 flavors. Pickled onion was the one that stuck around from the OGs. Then Flamin' Hot, that was the number 2 flavor. And then they brought in 2 new ones, beef burger and spaghetti sauce.
Oh my goodness, that sounds gross.
Yes. And so those did not last too long. And this is also when they introduced the one shape. So now just the one shape of the monster paw. But
probably a cost-saving measure, I would imagine.
Absolutely. And so they had the beef burger, spaghetti sauce. They replaced spaghetti sauce with just cheesy. And then at one point they had a vanilla ice cream variable. And they introduced all these different monsters, a pink monster, the blue yellow monster, the red monster, orange monster, and they have all these like they paired up with the flavors.
Yeah.
I say we try roast beef next. What do you think?
I am on board with that. This was another one I'm quite curious about. I feel like I already know what Flaming Hot is going to taste like. So
yeah, but I'm also mostly excited for that. Yeah. Wow, the roast beef ones smell like beef ravioli. And
kind of, yeah. Ooh.
I don't think I love that.
No, it's got sort of like a, I don't know, it smells like raw meat.
Yeah, it kind of tastes like unspicy taco seasoning.
Oh, that's a peculiar taste. It's weird because it almost tastes like nothing, but
yeah, but at the end, there's quite the aftertaste.
Yeah, it's almost like I don't really know how to explain it. It's like a vinegar beef. I don't know if I like the roast beef.
No, I do not like the roast beef. It tastes like a bad lunchroom, like meat option. That's not good. That's not chicken tenders.
Yeah, I feel like this.
I also don't like the way they're sticking to my teeth.
I feel like I've never eaten dog food, but like the like wet dog food that is like little bits of beef and stuff like that. I feel like that's what that probably tastes like.
Yeah, I do not love those. I don't think I'll be having many more of those, unfortunately.
No, I will be finding some other poor sucker to eat my roast beef ones, I think.
So Walker's was all over the place with these, right? With the 7 different flavors sort of coming and going, representing certain monsters. They also had these things called Tazos that you would get that were basically like Pogs.
Oh,
like,
really?
Remember Pogs?
Oh, interesting.
And they tried to get Tazos to catch on, and they did not. There was also some mystery tongue flavors that would change the color of your tongue.
Oh, that sounds like something that would actually be a big hit with the kids, in all honesty.
Yeah, probably, but like not good, just like bad.
Oh, yeah, no, it probably didn't taste good, or probably also a nightmare for parents. But you know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of when I was a kid. Do you remember the oh God, I'm blanking. I think they were called zebra stripe gum or zoo stripe gum.
Oh yeah.
Right. And they would come with like those little tattoos that you could like put on your tongue and stuff like that.
Pickled onion's good.
Yeah, I actually like the pickled onion one, to be honest.
That zebra gum, you got tattoos. I'd put them on my body. It was sort of why I have tattoos now, or because of zebra gum. And the flavor lasted for about 30 seconds.
Yeah, basically.
So then the original Monster Munch relaunch was in 2008, and that's that's basically what we're looking at now, right? So there's three monsters. There's pink for roast beef, yellow for pickled onion, and blue monster for flamin' hot. And also there is a bacon flavor that comes out yearly around Halloween. It's a little bit harder to find, but that's called those are Monster Munch webs. They're shaped like webs instead of paws.
Oh, if only we knew that, we could have tried to get our hands. Maybe next year.
They're bacon flavors. So yeah, maybe next year. Now, also interestingly, one more fact before we get to the Flamin' Hots. In 2016, I read this, and this excited me before I learned more of the details. So in 2016, Pickled Onion was voted champion of the World Cup of Crisps.
Really?
Yeah, but to my dismay, it's just a dumb survey on Twitter that for some reason has its own wiki entry, and it was held twice, every 4 years, 2012 and then 2016, until the guy stopped doing it because it got too big and he basically got too much shit for it online. So, yeah.
Well, I think there's a bit of a bias there already, because I couldn't help but notice it's called the World Championship of Crisps, which is
I mean, it was all crisp based. Actually, that was a big part. That was a big part of why people like slapped back at him in the 2016 version, because they were like, "Well, what do you consider crisps?" And it was.
I was gonna say that's such a
thing.
British way of describing.
Yeah,
so you already know there was no American snacks in that competition,
right? Because they call chips crisps and they call fries chips. Now,
yes.
This is a quick tangent, but I've got a question for you. This is something that I encountered in life recently. Before we get to this Flamin' Hots, I went out to dinner with my wife.
Yeah.
And this was a place that we've never been before, and she got a gift card to it. And so we went there. And she ordered the fish and chips.
Oh, interesting.
Fish and chips are great. You can get good seafood around from where we are. You know, she likes to order fish and chips. It used
to be a common thing every Friday night for years during the summer was fish and chips night at my house with, a nice hunk of cod or whatever it is. That's good. And
I love good fish and chips. Yeah.
With the French fries and the coleslaw is good.
I'm sorry. So repeat what you said again. With what does it come with?
French fries and coleslaw?
Right, because it's an English dish. Yeah. And they call it chips because that's what they call French fries. Guess what? This came with chips. This came with like actual potato chips. And I was offended, appalled. This was not even my dish. This was not even the dish that I ordered. And I was like, you have got to be shitting me. You cannot call it fish and chips and give me actual chips. I'm expecting fries.
Oh my goodness.
So fuck that place.
Fish and literal chips.
And they were like good. They were like good chips, they were like made in the restaurant. They were like sliced potatoes that were fried. But this is a regional dish from England and you are expecting French fries, it didn't say. It said house-made chips.
Wow.
Bullshit.
You want to know
the worst? You want to know the worst part about it?
What?
Is the gift card, like the amount that we spent, the gift card was too much, so we had to go back.
Oh no.
Yeah, so we went back, but begrudgingly. And yeah. Okay, so anyway, there are other Monster Munches in other countries like Ireland, France, and New Zealand, but those are made by other manufacturers and they are not the same. Also, Monster Munch is a very popular sort of trail mix that parents make around the Halloween time of year that I've never heard about before, but I learned about when Googling these.
Oh, interesting.
Let's try the Flamin' Hots. So these are Flamin' Hot. Now, right, Cheetos is part of the Frito-Lay company, which
Yeah.
Walker's also is. But there is and isn't, right? Because it's different. But there's
Yeah.
no like Flamin' Hot branding on this. It's not like the Flamin' Hot normally that we see. It's it's just regular old Flamin' Hot. So they smell not as hot as Flamin' Hot.
You know what they smell like to me? They smell like hot fries. Remember hot fries?
Yeah, Andy Capp's hot fries, of course.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what they taste like.
Yeah, it's basically a hot fry.
This is not regular Flamin' Hot. Now, I think American culture has really grasped onto the whole hot thing, right?
Yeah.
Everyone likes to eat hot wings. There's that show Hot Ones people love, and like there's hot sauces. And I think maybe this goes down to it's different. Maybe not just because of the brands are slightly different, but because like people don't have the same sort of heat tolerance in England that we might have over here with our American palates that, you know, eat a lot of, for lack of a better term, garbage. Even though it's stuff that I like, you know? Like I love Flamin',
but also,
I love Flamin' Hot Cheetos.
Also, there's a lot of ethnic foods that are common in America that do use a lot of spice.
Oh, absolutely.
That wouldn't be common in England, despite how diverse London might be, right?
Right,
you know,
right.
Like,
the palate
especially
is a little
like
bit
south of the border, Mexican, you know, South American stuff, all sorts of stuff like that.
right. It's a relatively more, let's say, unspiced palate.
Yeah, I think
Maybe that's
a
why
fair
these are a little
description.
different. These are not. These are good. I think the pickled onion are my favorite, but I think the beef are by far my least favorite. I don't even think I'll finish the beef bag. I will see if my friends want these or my wife wants some.
Yeah. The Flamin' Hot has like a sort of like a vinegary taste to it.
I do. I like them. I like them. I'm gonna mix them with the pickled onion and have a little bit of a grab bag later. You know.
They're sort of sweet too. It's almost like a, not even really like a hot taste. Honestly, it's more of like a sweet and sour sort of thing going on there. It's interesting.
Yeah, that's pretty accurate. Okay, so a new thing that we're going to establish on the show. Mm-hmm. Last time we ranked our snacks in terms of tiers on video games, and as much as we loved that, we decided to do it a little bit differently.
Yeah.
So, because we are importing a lot of these snacks, we are going to choose whether or not we want to pay the import tax on them, right? So, either there's three rankings. Either we love them so much that we would travel to the motherland to get them, or simply we would pay the import tax again to get them, or no way in hell, they're bad. We don't even want to pay the import tax. So, let's go flavor by flavor.
Okay. All right. I like that idea.
Let's start with the beef ones. What do you think about the beef?
That's easily no fucking way, dude.
Nope,
No
not
way.
paying the import tax for those. No way.
Absolutely not. I would feel bad for anyone who did pay the import tax for those.
Right, us. That's us. Yeah. Then next, I'm going to sort of go with what I think would be in the middle is Flamin' Hot. How do you feel about the Flamin' Hot flavor?
Well, I think I would agree with you. I think it would be in the middle for me. However, I would say that I wouldn't pay the import tax, not because I don't like them.
Yep.
But because I feel like I can get the same thing just anywhere. You know what I mean?
agree with you there. Yep, there's tons of other great chip flavors that represent this, and yeah, if I wanted this sort of crunchy texture, I'm gonna go with a Cheeto instead or something. You know?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Right.
Like a fun Cheeto flavor, like a Chile Limon, is gonna be more fun than this Flamin' Hot.
But like, just to reiterate, they're not bad at all.
No,
right?
No.
But it's more a case of like not distinct enough to make me be like, I have to pay the extra money to get these from overseas.
Right. And now I am going to personally, in my head, cue up the British national anthem, Pickled Onion. How do you feel about them?
All right. Well, I don't know if I share your
okay.
Your glowing review. I would pay the import tax on the pickled onion. I think they're good enough that I would eat them again. I actually think I might even like them a little bit more than like a Funyun, just simply because it's got that little bit of an extra kick with like that sort of vinegary kind of taste to it. It's a unique flavor.
Yeah.
I don't see myself hopping on the next plane over to go fly to to London, England, and grabbing a package of these while I hit up 50 Berkeley Square to see what's over there now, you know?
Yeah, you know what? I just had another one while you were saying that, and I do have to agree with you. It's not worth, I mean, obviously, like, this is an exaggeration, right? But, like, I don't know if I'm ever going to really think about these again, other than when in context talking about the podcast, right?
Yeah.
So I don't think they're a snack that really stands out to me. There are plenty of things I would get on a plane for, plenty of foodstuffs. The first thing that pops in my head is an In-N-Out burger. I would get on a plane just to go and get an In-N-Out burger. But definitely not the pickled onion varietal of Walker's Monster Munch. But still a lot of fun. I think they're a lot of fun. I think they do pair up well with the story that you told, being monsters and all of that. And,
they're certainly a very unique, like, aesthetic thing, right? Because of the way that they're shaped, you know, and I can see why this would be like, if you were a kid growing up in England in, you know, like the 70s, 80s, 90s, like this, I could see this being one of your favorite snacks just because, like, it's a fun thing. You know what I mean? And it's fun flavors, and, you know, there's a bit of a cultural identity going on there with it. So,
yep, right. It's been around. It's a little bit nostalgic. When they came back in 2008, they were really trying to play into that nostalgic, like, you know, frame of mind, and I think they did a good job. I like the designs of the bags, and relatively straightforward, and yeah, the monsters are cute. I would wear a T-shirt that says Monster Munch on it, and people would be like, "What's Monster Munch?" And then you'd have to.
Oh well, see, that's the trap. That's why I would never wear a T-shirt with Monster Munch on it, because now I'm locked into a 20-minute conversation where I have to explain what Monster Munch is. You know?
Something tells me that you're the one that's making that 20 minutes, but that's fine. That's on you. Yeah. No, thank you, Mitch. I think this was a lot of fun. Nice, good story, interesting story. You know, it's fun to hear about, like, all that sort of spooky stuff. And I mean, I would much rather have seen this blue monster. I don't think I would have shot my shotgun at blue monster, or
I don't know, man. Like, look at that thing, like
yellow monster.
Imagine how big this would be though if it was a real creature, right?
Yeah.
Like, I feel like this isn't some tiny little thing, you know, like this is like 8-9 feet tall.
Yeah, it's huge.
I think I'd rather take my chances with the octopus monster.
Yeah, you're probably right. You're probably right. All right. Thanks, Mitch.
Yeah, thank you, John. And everybody listening.
Yeah.
You know, we have other episodes of Cryptid Nuggets out that you can listen to. We have a first episode. This is our second. There's
That's
a
right.
chance that by the time you hear this, there might even be a third. Who knows?
Yep.
And also, John and I have the Beasty Boys podcast, which is also with some good friends of ours, Jarvis and Mike. It's on a bit of a hiatus right now, but we have, I think, like 13 or 14 episodes of that you can certainly go out and listen to if you want to hear more of us and like our style.
Yeah, hell yeah. They're right on this same feed. If you're on YouTube or Apple Podcasts or Spotify, you can just go to the show and scroll down a little bit, and you can find those Beastie Boys episodes. And we're hoping to get those two gentlemen, Jarvis and Mike Holmes, back on the podcast pretty soon.
Yeah.
And Mitch, thank you very much. Here's to spooky season. And you know, October, when we're recording this, I think is the spookiest month of the year. But this is also a very spooky time of year, November into December. So it's getting a little bit cold here in New England. We're going to become more shut-ins and talk about some more spooky, paranormal, creepy, weird things. I'm
reclusive around this time of year, just like Thomas Meyer.
Yeah, just like Thomas Meyer, and then for the next 15 years or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I do kind of live a nocturnal lifestyle anyway, so...
Yeah, you do. One more thing. I wonder if they can fit one of these on my pinky fingers, because if I was a kid, that'd be really fun. Kinda.
Oh,
Not
yeah.
bad.
You know, I didn't even think of that, huh? Because, like, the hole for the palm of the foot, so to speak, is kind of large. But I think if you were a kid with a smaller hand, you could totally, like, you know, not all the way, like it's a what was that treat called that was, you know, it was like a lollipop, but it was like shaped like a binky.
Ring pop?
That's it. That's the one. Yeah.
I like how you said binky. Yeah, so ring pop, but there was also the push pop that you put your finger in.
Yeah, no, I'm not thinking of that. I'm thinking of the one that you would wear on your finger, right? Like, this wouldn't be big enough for even a kid to wear on its finger, but, like, you could definitely get, like, the tip of it in there and, like, you know, put, like, five of them on your hand and go, ooh.
Did you ever put olives on your finger as a kid? Olives on your fingers?
I did when I was a kid, yeah.
Loved doing that. Loved that. That's a fun kid thing.
The things that fascinate you when you're that young.
Yep, doesn't take much. All right, Mitch, enjoy your Monster Munch. Talk to you soon.
Thank you, my friend. Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Decaf left, regular right. Decaf left, regular right. It's very challenging work.